Welcome to episode 2 of the Manhattan Art Review TV. I'm Sean Tatel. This is Isaac Goes, filmmaker. Thanks for coming, Isaac.
Thanks for having me.
And so today we'll be talking about your new film, Worlds, which we'll have a link somewhere, I'm sure. But before we get into any of my questions, I thought maybe you could just kind of do a brief overview of what the film's like. Larger question that interests me is this use of sort of like personal material towards an end that's clearly not like, you know, confessional diaristic storytelling, like that sort of like disconnect or tension between the two modes of like personal versus like abstraction is it's interesting to me the way you kind of like tiptoe between the two.
Sure, yeah. I think you yourself have put it in basically the correct way to begin with. It's that, you know, this diaristic material is not necessarily the subject matter of the film, it's the material for the film.
Right.
And when I was making the movie, you know, I had it in my head that I'm making something of like a scientific work of cinema, where I have a hypothesis or thesis that I then need to go out into the world and you know, put to the test. Naturally, given budgetary restrictions and things like this, I'm sort of married to what I have available to me, to what's at hand. But you know, I've made a lot of very straightforward journalistic films in the past, or diaristic films. And with this picture, immediacy was not necessarily my main goal. But in thinking of the subject matter or my thesis in making this film, the concept behind it, where we're looking into, you know, how we build up the world around us, you know, how we figure our own place in the larger social world we inhabit. Some degree of subjectivity in this is, you know, necessary. So it's not I feel like it's not necessarily at odds with what I'm trying to do to include this sort of diaristic subject matter. And I also like to think of the example of, you know, even in the hard scientists, or in the hard sciences, you have examples of scientists sort of having these like light bulb moments in their banal everyday lives. Like, because this is something I thought about a lot making the film, is I don't want this to come across as incredibly diaristic, though I know, you know, there are a lot of diaristic elements. But one of my favorite examples in the hard sciences is, you know, Einstein. I don't have the specifics of this, but, you know, having some issue with some problem in Brownian motion. The correct idea comes to him someday. He's just looking at a glass of water, staring at particles swirling, you know, in his cup of water. And I think, I don't know, it's just a little interesting anecdote that I think ties in this idea of scientific filmmaking with the mundane everyday life.
Right. Yeah, there's like, well, there's a couple layers with it where, like, one, you know, you can't, like, it's a falsehood to sort of assume some sort of like grandiose sense of objectivity that like you can remove yourself from this. And then also that I think, with the like Einstein anecdote, or like, you know, just these stories of like a scientist like having a dream that makes them have some breakthrough, that like the sciences, you know, present themselves as whatever more objective than the arts, but like they're no less creative.
Yeah, exactly.
And and so to try to like integrate those things is a pretty, you know, fruitful experiment.
There are also a lot of things I think that aren't explicitly diaristic in the film. And to go back to something you mentioned earlier, you know, material shaping the idea and back and forth, and even you mentioned my travels. That's something where, you know, I have the concept of the film. Initially, I don't know I'm going to be spending an extended period of time in France or wherever, you know, and I go and I see castles and things like this, and I realize, okay, I readjust. I realize, okay, I can work this into the bigger picture of my film. You know,
and that's the thing with your like scientific approach and like treating it as a you know, that you have like a hypothesis rather than a plot.
Exactly.
And because it's a hypothesis, it's more of just like a working method that you then impose upon the world that you live in.
Yes.
And then
what happens happens. And then
and then you build it out.
We get the data back.
Yeah.
And we see where that takes us. Exactly.